Sorry, can't say.
What's that word you use?
Spoilers.
I like that word.
Hello and welcome to Spoiler Nation, the podcast where we have spoiler-filled discussions on some of our favorite and some of our not-so-favorite movies and TV shows. Today, in this episode, we are talking about the Amazon Prime TV series, Game of Thrones hopeful, The Wheel of Time. And joining me to talk about this is the Dark One himself. Ollie.
I don't think you can straight out of the bat. I don't think you can call it a Game of Thrones hopeful, because obviously it's a tier below that. You've said this to me before. This is how you explained it to me, that it is definitely B compared to A tier.
You have to assume that when Amazon commissioned, obviously this is a book written by Robert Jordan and commissioned, adapted by
Rafe Judkins, I think the guy's name
Rafe
is.
Judkins, under the advisement of Brandon Sanderson, who of course continued the book
he
series.
worked off Robert Jordan's notes once he passed away to finish the last few books.
That's right. Series. So yeah, this is of course based on the Wheel of Time high fantasy series of novels written by, as we've said before, Robert Jordan, and then which is for maybe the first 14 books.
Yeah, I think it was 14 books in total. So he wrote like 11 of them, and then his notes were to be for the last book to finish up. But because the notes were so extensive, they had to like expand that into 3 books.
I see. So yeah, and then and of
could have
course,
been a money grab as well. I don't know.
Well, I mean, maybe you have to round out the series. Right?
Yeah. So he had a lot to work with by that point. So
exactly.
kind of unraveling.
So yeah, and Brandon Sanderson, of course, is a famous author, or a bona fide author in his own right.
Yeah, he's a good fantasy writer. He's actually probably most well known in writing circles for his teaching. He has all his lectures of creative writing up for free on YouTube, and he's an excellent teacher. I've learned a lot from him.
So now, Ollie, you have read most of the books.
I've read all the books.
All of them.
I'd say like the whole series through, and then half the series again through. The good stuff, I think, in book circles, like the first 4 to 5 books are meant to be like the juiciest and the best. And then kind of Robert Jordan falls to a bit of like, I don't know, meandering and politics and like...
This sounds very familiar.
Yeah, he kind of gets stumped down. I'm not exactly sure what was going on there. Maybe it was just how much he built up in the first 5 books. He had to try to find a way to work through it.
Yeah, so very much like Game of Thrones, it's based on a high fantasy, it's based on a fantascy novel.
I think you could even say that Game of Thrones was like not quite as high fantasy.
It's not, yeah.
And it's a little bit different. I feel like, because George R. R. Martin had experience with TV writing beforehand, so he almost like expected this and aimed for it to be for TV,
yes.
Whereas Robert Jordan was like building
Books.
this whole universe, this whole world. So it seemed like he had no intention, or he wasn't in the forefront of his mind how this would adapt to a television thing, which is kind of plays into, because I think to begin with, he was commissioned to write 3 books. And the first book, you can see how that could be related to a trilogy, because it seems to be like a lot has happened and a lot of progress has happened. But then, like I said, the story kind of got carried away from him. Everything got carried away. If you turn a 3-book series into a fucking 14-book series, it's a lot of expansion, a lot of meandering. I don't know. There is complaints about his writing, because sometimes he will spend like a page or half a page describing how someone's dressed. But that's one of the things that actually attracted me to the book series so much, is like the way it's written, the amount of characters, the amount of depth. It's almost like War and Peace in that sense.
I see. Interesting. Well, look, but we're not here to review. We're not here to talk about the books per se. We are talking about the TV adaptation.
Yeah.
Swear your oath, Moraine Sedai.
I swear to speak no word that is not true, to make no weapon with which one person may kill another, and never to use the one power as a weapon.
Do you know what Aes Sedai means in the old tongue? Servants of all. It is they who serve the world.
I didn't choose this path, but I will follow it.
Where next?
The two rivers. The old blood runs deep in those mountains. Let's hope it's prepared them for what's coming. The Dark One is waking. But there will be one who can stand against him. And it's one of the five of you.
You fully lost your mind.
Your life isn't going to be what you thought.
Moraine.
What are those? His army is coming.
We protect the people we love. No matter the cost.
Our enemies are everywhere. They will leave no one standing.
We've lost too many people already. I can't lose you.
You won't. If we do not stop the Dark One now, the whole world will burn. I can't allow it.
I have not read any of the books, so I'm coming in. I've honestly never heard of this, book series until the show came out. So I'm coming in fresh. But of course, you're coming in.
And I'm coming in with incredible expectations.
Exactly.
Yes. So this is the dynamic, I suppose. You could say.
So, I'm going to rely on you to kind of, expand on some of the concepts that they've established on the show so far that maybe they didn't expand on. So, new listeners can, or listeners who are new watchers can learn a bit more about the things that they don't address. So just a quick recap. Obviously, this follows Moraine. Moraine, who is an Aes Sedai. She's played by Rosamund Pike. You might know her from Gone Girl and I Care a Lot. Most recently, both amazing movies. And she, I think this is a good. They've picked the right actress to be like a good anchor point into the series. She plays an Aes Sedai who is kind of like
almost like your Sean Bean, if you're going to make those comparisons.
That's right. That's right. And she has a purpose, which is to find these teenagers who she thinks are basically who she suspects one of them is the Dragon Reborn,
the hero of prophecy,
the
one
chosen
that will
one,
save the world.
In this universe, and she's kind of I would say maybe a witch person. She has as an Aes Sedai, has magic, and she knows how to. They call it the weave or the weave the wheel. Is that
it's
what
a
they're
bit
doing?
different comparing the power to the actual history or the timeline. It's like the wheel weaves as the wheel wheels.
Okay,
so that's talking about the age lace, how time is constructed and how it plays out. Whereas what she does is she weaves the power, she channels it, and that's a whole complicated thing.
Okay, so I guess let's a quick summation of the story is, and this is how I see it. So
with your virgin mind's eye.
So a long time ago there was this so in this universe there's this thing called the One Power, right? And it's magic. It's the source of magic in this world. And a long time ago there was like a war between good and evil. And the leader of said evil, called aptly named the Dark One, tried to tap into the One Power to do stuff, but he, in the process, corrupted it specifically for the men in this universe. So, of course, women, the women. Who are now referred to as the Aes Sedai, as in they're the women power wielders. They have to step in to save the day, or save the day, or pick up the pieces.
Yeah, that's kind of what they expanded on in the last episode with that flashback. It's like we have to clean up your mess. Essentially.
And so as a result of that, this is obviously thousands of years later. Men who touches the One Power and who uses magic eventually fall into madness because of how it's corrupted. But we focus on the kind of the Two Rivers Five, So we have these. So we have Lan, the redhead, obvious main character. And then we have Egwene, who is like studying to become a wisdom, who is like kind of the spiritual
Yeah, like
guardian.
a wise woman, almost like a healer.
Exactly, a healer. And then we have the person that she is trained under, who is Nynaeve, she's the current wisdom. And then we have Matt, who is kind of the kind of thief with the heart of gold, is how I see him.
I think that works.
And then we have Perrin, who is, I think,
The blacksmith.
he's a blacksmith.
That's a good way of
right.
putting it,
That's
yeah.
right. He's the blacksmith. He has a wife and kid.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, no, he has a wife who is expecting.
Yes.
And
No
and
longer
then,
expecting.
yeah. Well, yeah. So Moraine comes in. Obviously, spoilers for the series. So watch the show, and then come back to us talking about it. So Moraine goes into this town, and the show is about her trying to get these kids together to figure out who is the dragon reborn, who has been prophesized to stop the Dark One to save the day.
Classic kind of fantasy vibes,
Yeah.
for sure. That's why this is one of the most popular kind of fantasy series out there, I think. At least the books.
And alongside her is her warder, Lan, who she shares a special bond with.
A magical bond. It's not a relationship. It's an actual magical bond.
Yeah. So that's one of the kind of wild or out of unique concepts that the book or the show or the story has introduced. So So what we'll do is I'll just start with my overall thoughts right now, and then I'll jump on to you to, as a book reader, how maybe you can talk more about how well did they adapt it, or if the changes they made were positive or negative.
Well, this is a big thing that comes up because I'm part of a Facebook group that actually talks about the differences. We talk about this a lot because it's like it's really hard for me to separate my understanding of the book from the series. And this is typical with anyone that reads or watches adaptations, and you have to be able to separate them. Otherwise, you're not going to enjoy yourself. So
Exactly.
I can't even access your understanding of this series right now because it's literally, it comes as you completely fresh. Whereas for me, I'm comparing it against something.
I think it still is a worthwhile and fun experience to watch something this way, but I understand that it's a completely different experience because you have a parallel universe that you're comparing this against. So for me, when I first saw the first episode, I was like, "Oh, this is bad." I was like, "Oh, this is." There is something about the way that the first episode is shot. I'm tempted to give it like pilot-itis, where most pilot episodes of TV shows they're sagged with the gargantuan task of basically kind of expressing the concept of the show to the producers and people who greenlight stuff and to test audiences. So they have to quickly introduce all the characters and the function of how the show works. This is at the very least back in the day when network TV is a thing. Like that's obviously come to varying degrees. That's still being done. So if I'm being forgiving, might be the first episode just felt very rushed, very but
you're only really interested when they actually start to have that battle
when there's action, and it's all quite generic as well. So that was part of my issue. I don't mind if you had to rush things to introduce the characters, but it was just very generic fantasy language.
I think it was that one thing we talked about after watching the first episode. It was about like Perrin, the blacksmith, grabbing his wife and her being all brooding and him being like, "I love you." And it's like, that's just horrible. That's just really lazy writing.
Exactly. No one's saying anything specific about themselves. And then when Moraine is introduced, she's like, obviously this is part of her character, and I love her now, but she's very withholding, but for a weird reason. And it was just the way that the story plays out and information is fed to us was really like, it was kind of cheesy. And I thought, okay, I don't know. I think this is going to be a hate watch kind of show. But then, second episode, this is what got me into the show that I was like, okay, I will. This is what kind of hooked me in terms of, okay, I will give you a chance. It's the very first scene in the second episode where they introduce the white cloaks, and the way that they show how I believe he chops off one of the Aes Sedai's hands to show that that is the way. Like, number one, it shows that he understands how the Aes Sedai works, and the way that you get close up to all the rings that he's collected, and the way that he tells us there's a very specific story about
there's a brutality to the dish. Because the flavor doesn't come only from the bird. Its bones and beak and feet cut the inside of your mouth. Not so much that it hurts, just enough that you bleed. Don't be afraid, girl. An Aes Sedai should know above all others that sometimes brutality is the only path to mercy.
The way that first sequence is shot, it was like feeding us information in a very adept visual storytelling way. It's not someone just saying, hey, this is what this is. And I thought, wow, where was this in the first episode?
Yeah.
So that was what really got me into the show, in for the long haul, at least for the first season. And I think overall, I enjoy it. Like, I'm having a blast watching it. It's not a prestige drama. It's it's definitely not Game of Thrones tier, if that was what they're hoping for. But I think if people, as a new watcher, I think if people, it's told in a way that is streamlined enough that if we temper our expectations and have some fun with it, I think it can be quite a fun show. Is it nuanced? No, I it's not. The themes are very at this point, characters are basically saying the themes at you, know, and which is fine, but it's essentially, if I held it more to Game of Thrones standard, and it's just, I know it's unfair, but it's hard to avoid that comparison, because obviously Amazon Prime, like, you can tell in the meeting rooms, they're like, where's our Game of Thrones? So I think it's kind of fair to kind of,
but it was a sensational series, like everyone was talking about
right.
It is literally like cast a shadow over the genre,
right? Yeah, exactly. And I don't need everything to be like that, but it does sometimes feel like the show wants to be Game of Thrones, and it tries for a few things to varying degrees of success. So you did seem to hit the nail on the head in terms of the writing. The writing seems to be a sense of like almost underdeveloped, a little, I'm not going to say half-baked. I just want to say it hasn't just, it's lacking in that sophistication. Yeah.
And I think a big part comes to that because they have all these plot plans for the characters from the books, but then a lot of what you get from how they feel and what they're going through is done through free internal discourse. So literally them writing in their own heads, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going on. And then you try to explain that in dialogue, and if you're not, adept at doing that, it's going to come off kind of clunky. Yeah.
They're
clunky or melodramatic, which I think this series has fallen victim to a lot. A lot of the drama seems melodramatic and lacking. Yeah,
I don't mind. I don't mind melodrama as long as it's earned. And I think I think this show does big picture quite well in terms of, by the end of this episode, we need to hit this emotion, the structure of the episodes is cool because it leads to some really awesome moments that is quite fun to witness, and that's what keeps me going. But So that's my general thoughts so far. But what about the other? If we turn the other page,
to see it from the other.
Yeah.
Well, it's I don't know. You're right about the starting. I feel like people that I've talked to about it have been like, okay, it's gotten progressively better with every episode. Which there are aspects of it. Obviously, there are moments that seem a little bit poorly executed, or you might want to question why they're there. Like that whole sequence, and I can't remember which episode, but it was a sequence where they had like the warder that killed himself, and they spent like probably 20 minutes of an episode expounding upon this grief that he was feeling.
Yeah. So that was the first time that we actually saw the White Tower in its fruition, and the plot is centered around
Stepan, the warder who's
kind of
Aes
grieving.
Sedai had been murdered. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And so a criticism of that would be that you spent 20 minutes putting this thing in that wasn't really essential to the plot, and there is so much that was essential to the plot that are part of the books that could have been put in its place. It just feels like it was developing these characters in a way that wasn't really helping the plot in any way. And I feel like with as much source material you have to be adept in doing these things where you can not just show this character grieving and show this character having emotion, but you need to be able to do 3 of those things in one scene. You need to be able to show that he's grieving, but also show that he's a leader amongst his men, amongst that, so that he's also subservient to the White Tower and he's good at self-sacrificing. I feel like there wasn't enough for how much time they spent on it. Not enough was established for the actual storyline.
Right,
it seemed to be self-indulgent. But that, again, I'm starting to think that is essentially the writers falling in love with this Lan character. Because I said it to you in that last episode. He is the male equivalent of a Mary Sue.
I see.
And
Okay, let's talk about that. So let's talk about we'll put a pin in Lan, but obviously we will come back to it. But
Okay.
how faithful is this show to the books?
Okay.
And
What
were
they've
there
done
any
really
good
well,
changes?
what they've done really well, I think,
Yeah.
was how they kind of weaved the lore into it in the first few episodes. I think it was the second episode when they're like on horseback singing the Manetheren song. They don't even know the meaning of the words behind, and then Lan kind of translates to them the importance of this ancient civilization that lived. That was the seed from there.
I believe it was Moraine who says that.
Was it Moraine? Because
Yeah.
Lan did it with Nynaeve later. That's right.
Weep for the blood of Aemon, cry for Manetheren, long ago, long ago.
It's good to remember Manetheren.
It's just a song. No idea who Manetheren is anyway.
In the old tongue, Manetheren means mountain home. Used to be the name of the place you now call the Two Rivers. During the Trolloc Wars, the army of Manetheren was small but strong. A thorn in the Dark One's hand. So he sent the entirety of his forces to destroy it. But when this massive host arrived, the women and men of the mountain home stood before it, the shallowest bend of the river at their backs, ready to fight. Their king, Aemon, like in the song, had sent messages to the neighbors they'd fought for in the past, and they were promised aid if they could hold for 3 days. And somehow they did. Against that monstrous host they held for an hour, then a second, then a third. For 3 days they fought, and though the land became a butcher's yard, no Trolloc crossed the river. But on the third night, no help had come. So they fought on alone. For 6 days, for 9, and on the 10th day they knew. They knew no help was coming. From the city, Queen Eldrine organized her people to take the children and find refuge in the mountain keeps, though many of them went not to safety, but to join the army fighting for their home. Not a step of ground was given up until it was soaked in blood. But on the 13th day, the army of Manetheren was gone. Queen Eldrine felt her husband die. driven by grief, she reached out and she hurled the one power at the Trolloc army. A hurricane of fire washed across the land. The Dark One's host ran like beasts, but they were not fast enough, for the flames caught them, consumed them. But Eldrine had drawn more of the one power than any woman could ever hope to wield, and it burnt her right through from the inside out. But the children and their minders hidden in the mountains had been saved. There was nothing left of their farms, their villages, or their great city. But they returned, and they held the land that was theirs. That is why the song says weep. Weep, weep for Manetheren. Weep for what is lost forever. The old blood runs deep in you. Remember that. You'll need it in the days to come.
So Moraine explained that to them, and she kind of revealed this larger world to them, which I think is one of the best things about the book series and about the series generally, is the fact that they can show you a world that is in itself steeped in this history and this lore that makes it seem bigger than it is.
Yes.
So it's really imaginatively evocative.
That's so interesting because I love that scene as
Yeah.
well. Like, I love the monologue that Moraine gives to the kids, because it's a very good example of, obviously, kind of the rule of storytelling is show, don't tell. But I think that there are moments in the story where it works to give exposition. And I think that scene is a good example of exposition done right.
Yeah.
Because what she's saying, it's not just, hey, here's some info. It's, hey, this is actually relevant to you, the characters right now. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is good writing.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely like good writing in this show. It's just, it's kind of mixed right now from my perspective.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, I agree with you. There's a lot being done in that scene, especially like, I mean, it kind of had a nice pace to it as well, because sometimes it's all action. You want a bit of a cool down in between to release that tension. That was beautifully done.
Yeah.
But then they did it again later on with that next, when they went to that Shadow City, I think it was Shadar Logoth, and the way that Lan kind of, well, I think Moraine was incapacitated at the time, so Lan kind of tells again the history of this place and shows that back during the Trolloc Wars, there was this city that reclused itself and cut itself off from everyone else, and then fell to this kind of gargantuan shadow that killed everyone.
Yes.
And I think it's nice to set, again, it's expanding into the lore, into the history. It's setting this concrete period called the Trolloc Wars, where things started to go bad after this age of decadence, maybe, where they actually were at the height of the peak of a civilization before it fell.
Yeah. What was the most drastic change, do you think?
Change. There are a few little changes. So I can understand why they would have done it in terms of like changing the magic system, because initially in the books the magic system is gendered. There's the male part of the source and the female part of the source. And it's because of that whole tainting of the male side that they start to go mad.
So they actually, on the male side, tap into a different kind of side of
it's
the
like
power.
two sides of the same thing.
Okay.
But only a man can only touch the man's side, a woman can only touch the female side.
But it's more, for this one, it seems more universal. Like,
yeah. I think that was to get rid of, I don't know why they've done it, honestly, but it seems to be like slightly, it seems to be a little bit irrelevant, and it seems to be like a kind of nonsensical change, because it does so many things to say that there is the male side and the female side. Because right now, logically, if there's only one, but only men could get sick or get mad from touching the source, it's like, why? What is it about the man? What is it about men that do? Is it inherently men? Or is it inherently the thing that they're touching? So I think that was a change that probably didn't need to be there. I don't know why. Maybe for the sake of simplifying the power, but I don't think it's that much of a complex thing to grasp.
How about like, so I understand that Perrin
the wife thing.
Yeah, he didn't have a wife.
He didn't have a wife, but he has this persistent theme throughout his story, which they've tried to elaborate on a little bit and tried to develop, which is that he's averse to violence. But he takes on this violence when he has to like defend his wife and himself from the Trollocs and accidentally killing his wife. And the whole story arc, without revealing too many spoilers, is that he is resistant to use the axe. He's carrying this axe that he made himself, and he's killed Trollocs with it, and he has this thing within him that axes only cause death, and that there's nothing good can come out of it, which is kind of developed with this way of belief in him getting interested by it.
Is that not in the books?
A little bit, but I feel like they try to make it a bit more vocal in the series. He says it a few times. When he sits down to drink with Rand, he tells him about the way of belief. But it's almost like they weren't really investing too much time in it. I'm a little bit conflicted there because Perrin is probably one of my favorite characters in the books.
I see.
But he doesn't seem to have... I think because mainly his... Again, this comes back to the difference between the books and the series, is that the books have much more time in the characters' heads. You get to understand how they think and what motivates them.
Yeah.
And I think from the start, Perrin's... his way of thinking appeals to me. He's very slow and likes to take his time. But at the same time, I think there is this aspect of his power doesn't really get properly expanded upon in the series so far. There's a little bit about the wolves and the golden eyes, but...
Yes, that's interesting.
There is this actual phenomenon that he is, and they develop in the book series.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
They actually meet another one of a person like him. Is this too much of a spoiler to announce what he actually is?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, they tease it out with the fact that he has connection with wolves, and then his eyes go gold.
Yeah. I actually thought he might have more like powers, like animal powers, where he can control other animals. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that was a cool moment when I like that scene. So it's that scene where the White Cloak captures Egwene and Perrin, and essentially has to force her to use is forcing her to use the one power so that he can have an excuse to be like, all right, I need to kill you now.
Yeah, that was a really good scene, I think. Besides the wolves, they kind of seem like dogs that were running around, and they kind of feel like a little bit low budget for me.
I think I can suspend my disbelief. But although it was kind of a bummer, I think we presume that he's dying. Like the bad guy is dead, so the White Cloak. But I like that was a trigger. It's a well designed scene where it sets our expectations and in terms of the focus is on Egwene, and then actually Perrin is the one that weaves. I assume that's weaving, but maybe that's not weaving.
It's not. It's something else entirely.
Yeah, because there isn't a hint that like he's going mad or something, so it's fine.
More or less, like the book series has this concept called the Tarvaran or the Tuvaran. I can't remember how they pronounce it.
Yeah, this is of course introduced in the very end of this episode.
Yeah. Well, they mention it in the first episode, but it kind of just goes over your head because there's no context, no grounding for it.
Yeah.
Basically, it's just people that are kind of focal points for the pattern of time to kind of wheel it. The kind of people that can change fate in a way.
Yeah. So
it's described more thoroughly in the books, but
essentially, they're like essentially they're the main characters to the wheel of time.
They are the main characters. It's the same idea, like behind people. Like I don't know, they have historical figures that they expound upon in the books themselves, like this kind of Arthur Hawkwing character, which is like a historical king who's kind of similar to like Alexander the Great or like King Arthur or something like that. And it is this idea these are the historical people that can change the course of history. And this is what a Tarvaran is, more or less.
Yeah. So this is interesting. So let's talk about and we can dive deeper into what we like or don't like, but I'll just I'll start with this, which is let's talk about the idea in season 1 about the Dragon Reborn and who it... Obviously, this is the whole crux of this season, which is the question of who is the Dragon Reborn, which one of the 5, right? And then in the beginning, you think it's the 4 teenagers, right? So you have Matt, Perrin, Egwene, and Rand, of course, who's like heavily foreshadowed as the Dragon Reborn. But
I don't know. You halfway through, you were thinking it was Matt.
I was
and Nynaeve. I was you were getting thrown all these red herrings.
Well, I was hoping it was not anyone other than Rand, because I personally find Rand a very boring character. I don't know. He just seems quite bland to me. I don't know if it's the actor or just the way he's written. I just don't. I'm not hooked by this character, so I was hoping that he's not like the main anchor,
Yeah,
because
fair.
that means that more screen time is
I
given
suppose
to him.
a lot more comes out because he has so much responsibility thrust onto him and so much more pressure put on him that you kind of see who he is based on that. But I can understand how he could come across as almost two-dimensional.
Yeah, and
Almost like the main character. The biggest problem about writing a main character is that sometimes you focus too much on what happens to them as opposed to the character themselves.
I think two characters that suffered from the plot machinations that in a way get in the way of their characterization. It's Rand and Egwene. I think they're both casualties of this because I think Rand first and foremost, but Egwene has something. The episode that kind of saved it from me, or that made me understand her character, is like that provided some nuance into her character a bit more, is when they're at the White Tower and when Nynaeve was very reluctant to, she hates the Aes Sedai, of course, because her previous wisdom trainer they were rejected, and so she has this mistrust, right? And also Nynaeve is just like a defiant person in general, but she's just like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. But when Moraine talks about like, I've met potential people who can weave the one power, you can see like kind of to the side the actress for Egwene, like she plays her performance. In her performance, it's like she's proud and she's like very excited to be part of a potential Aes Sedai member.
And that's very much in keeping with the character in the books, I think.
I just think that,
she's strong and she's ambitious.
I like that. And I think, and in this episode, this finale as well, you see like Rand, the thing that snaps Rand out, which I was very glad that happened, which is, yes, he wants a child with Egwene and things like that. But then he's like, that's not what she wants because she has, ambition. This is not all, at the very least, from his perspective, that's not what she wants. Yeah. But I wish we saw more of that. I wish that we gave her some more screen time to really like tap into like why she's so interested, or hear her talk about things like that. I don't think we really got a lot of that, but not this is the least of the show's problems, but it's because they all keep and this is a one criticism as well in terms of Egwene, which is everyone talks about like Moraine is like, Egwene is the most powerful, is one of the most powerful wielders I've ever met. But we don't see that, actually. We don't actually
see too much of it. No.
Yeah.
It's because she's a little bit untrained at the time.
But we're like, okay, then how...
How does Nynaeve do what she does?
No, it's more like, how are we supposed to believe that she's very powerful? Everyone keeps talking about it, but we don't see
There's
it.
like a pretense about it.
Yeah, whereas like Nynaeve, we see how powerful she is.
That's exceptional. She's literally, what they've said it in the series, and they've said it in the books as well, is that she is the most powerful channel that anyone's ever seen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So,
whereas Egwene is probably one of the strongest they've seen in a while. And this other character that comes out, it seems to be that they have this. Again, this is what's cool about it, this idea of like things changing with time and these things that happen by themselves as a consequence of this wheel of time. Things turn and then things start to change in a general sense, that now all these people start coming up, and teenagers now, that are more powerful than people that have been practicing their whole life. It's that things are starting to happen. It's almost like the universe or the wheel of time itself is turning itself to be ready for Tamon Gaidon, this final battle.
Tamon Gaidon.
It's throwing out these people that are capable of contesting with this battle, which is again the final kind of idea between good and evil that gets expanded so well in this series, is that there is the Dark One and there is the Creator, and the Dark One is more or less negation and death, and the Creator is life. So if the Creator is in charge of the Wheel of Time, what gets poured out is almost like creating this kind of balance to what happens with the Dark One and vice versa. You kind of see this whole world as a playground for this battle, which again is like kind of cosmology of it, I suppose.
Here's what I understand about this whole thing as it progresses. Obviously, they're still up in the air in terms of like what their roles are. Obviously, we know that they're the
Tamon Gaidon?
No, they're the focal point.
Oh, the
Tavarens. But I thought as the season goes, I thought that my theory was that the soul of the dragon was split into 5.
Oh, okay. That's
And
interesting.
then that's why they
It's a whole
all
different
like could be
concept
a
of
potential-
reincarnation. They mentioned
Yeah.
that in Before Sunrise, don't they? That idea of like souls
it's
being
2 people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
That's why you have soulmates.
Yeah.
But I guess that's not the case.
No.
So we confirm 100% that Rand is the Dragon Reborn. Like the book is saying that.
They said that in the series, I suppose.
Yeah.
Right, when he had that confirmation, that supposedly dramatic revelation.
Yeah.
It was a little bit.
Let's talk about that scene, because this is so the moment we supposedly are supposed to believe that Rand is confirmed the Dragon Reborn is in episode 7, The Dark Along the Ways. This is, of course, the episode where they jump into the portal, and then they Matt gets left behind, and they just go into this like crazy kind of dark dimension between where that helps them travel quickly, I assume.
The ways.
Yeah, the ways. So in the ways there's some weird stuff going on, but so the reveal out in the same episode is he hears this voice inside of him that says,
You've known all along that you were the dragon.
Yeah. Okay. So as someone, this is one of the moments where I'm like, I think this show is relying too much on assumed knowledge by book readers to make this sing, because they didn't actually put in which is very interesting, because it's in a very stark contrast to Nynaeve's reveal, because and I know that she doesn't turn out to be the Dragon Reborn, but the way they executed her scene, where
the way they actually led up to that scene entirely.
The story building where they have that conversation with the false dragon about
when you do see the dragon, you'll know, because there will be a burst of light and power.
Exactly.
That was really well constructed, but it completely lacked that with Rand's reveal.
Exactly. So you
seemed to come out of nowhere.
It doesn't feel earned.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And while Nynaeve's thing, obviously, like logically, you can't confirm yet. Emotionally, it feels real for that moment. For in that episode, you felt like you basically you're in the position of all the characters where, oh shit, we're looking at the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah,
right.
But it seems like that's the problem with the show had, is that they tried to create this who is it? The mystery. It could be anyone, but they didn't actually. They turned all your attention onto Matt suddenly suffering this madness, so Matt must be the dragon. Or suddenly it's Nynaeve, she must be the dragon. Oh, Egwene's powerful as well. Perrin's got eyes, but then they took the attention away from Rand, but they didn't sow any of the little seeds beforehand to make you even think for a moment that could be him. They tried to make it so surprising that it was almost like too much.
Yeah, it's too out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Even though, like, I know he's at some point, like, he's focused so much, and the show starts with him that he can't really not be that. But they didn't put in the work. Like, even we'll touch on Matt, but I think with Rand and his reveal, where are the scenes where he knew this all along?
Yeah.
He's been like outwardly saying like even he says in this final episode, like, I thought it was Egwene. Well, right? It's like, but then
how come you were doubting yourself and assuming you were? Like, where were those moments?
And we were instructed to not trust the voices in the ways, but it's the voices in the ways that confirms, like, you are the Dragon Reborn, and then then they cut to the few moments that he was doing the weave and stuff. It was actually him. I think that's kind of smart, but I think you should have done it throughout the season.
Yeah, so I think it
was rushed.
I think it was rushed, but I think that the scene itself wasn't bad.
Yes.
It's just the context around it and the lead up to it was just lacking.
Exactly.
The reveal was good, but there was like, what were you... Why were you telling us this? This is kind of irrelevant. It came out of nowhere.
Exactly. It's kind of like just some random person came in and be like, hey, you're the Dragon Reborn. See ya.
And it's like, oh, okay.
And I was confused because I didn't know if this was bad writing or we're not supposed to believe that. You know, I thought we were supposed. It's going to be like the rug is getting pulled out from under them, and everyone.
That's what they're aiming. Oh. You know what? When you were talking before, it kind of dawned on me. It's like I've had this thought for a while, but then there's something else dawned on me. It's like they had so much material in the book to kind of cram into the series that they almost tried to they missed points of motivation by trying to stick to these plot points. So the one we're talking about now with Rand revealing, they didn't really line up for it well because they tried to put too much into it. And then they tried to set these people up along these markers that were significant to the plot. They lacked the dialogue to make it happen, to make it seem authentic. It's almost like they're lacking this interaction between the characters. Almost like they're moving these figures around this board like in a board game. Yeah. But they haven't actually connected them in a way.
Yeah, they have the outline, but they don't have the details to make it sing.
Yeah. The big picture thing, like you said, they did well. It's just that actually how they managed to do that sometimes. And
point A,
it was
point
lacking
B.
in some of the points, or it wasn't properly kind of put into its context well.
It really feels like, and I hate to say it, it's kind of a little lazy storytelling. It's basically the writer saying, just go with it.
Yeah, I wonder whether it's lazy or whether it's just inexperience.
Maybe, I don't know. I don't know the experience of the writing team.
But then I think of all the stuff that they missed out from the books that was actually really good at developing these characters, all the interactions they could have had, and it's
right. They could have just one-to-one adapted a scene. Right.
I think that might have been hard. I can see why they've made changes. Fair enough.
Right.
But it makes me wonder, why not add 4 more episodes? If it means sacrificing some of the budget for the sake of I don't know. I don't know how these things work. I don't know how money. Obviously, it's a big factor. But at the same time, why not cut out some of the stuff that costs so much money and make it more low budget, more about conversations, more about these interactions. 8 episodes isn't a lot of episodes.
No, it's not.
What?
Maybe that's just what they were given. Maybe that's
all they're allowed to.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Matt of it all, right? Quite a controversial character, I feel like, both behind the scenes and in the show. Obviously, it has been announced that the actor who plays Matt, who I think his name is Barney Harris, is that his name? Let's see. Yes, so Barney Harris is no longer... it has left the show, so he will be replaced by a different actor for Matt, which is kind of a shame because, from my perspective, he was the best actor.
Oh yeah, we agree on this. He was one of the most interesting characters. He had a charisma about him that was actually enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, and
his delivery and his dialogue was good.
And I think because of that, it made me invest in that character so much more, which actually makes it slightly frustrating. In terms of where his character went, maybe it's because of his abrupt departure, the actor's departure from the show. But I'm not buying what's happening to Matt right now because you have this arc of. So first of all, like you said, maybe this is their. You can tell me if it's present in the books. This who is it? Mystery. Is that in the books?
It's there for a little bit, but it's kind of more or less evident
that it's Rand.
Yeah, because each of these different Tabaran have their own kind of character.
Right.
Like Perrin, it established pretty early on what he is, and he's on a channeler. He's this guy who can commune with wolves, who has this connection with wolves.
So that's very interesting because I understand why they do that. I understand in the adaptation they're this is a streamlined way, but
even I think in the books I think Moiraine knows more or less, or she's pretty certain that it's Rand because the fact that
because she's so misguided that it's Egwene, but there's no reason.
That's what doesn't ring true. They're just trying to make this kind of guess who kind of thing. But what's so stupid is she understands the prophecy, and the prophecy is that the Dragon Reborn was born of an Aiel. This is this kind of race of this people that are red hair and tall. And you see the start of the second last episode where that warrior with red hair fights all these people with spears.
Yeah, so that is that's in was it episode 7?
Episode 7, the start of episode 7, the battle on Dragon Mount, where Tam, Althor, Rand's father, in quotation marks there, the guy who raised him at
Yes.
least, he found this child and he takes him home to raise him.
Yeah, that.
But then in the prophecy, they know that the child was born of Dragonmount, that they know the child was born of an Aiel, and I think that's pretty well expounded. And she's common, or
they're
she's
the redhead.
yeah, the redheads
people,
and
yeah.
she's fluent with that. And all the way through the series, like, oh, what's an Aiel doing in the Two Rivers? Everyone's saying that, so it's like it's pretty obvious it's him. But
Why is that missing?
I
Why is
think
that
I
missing?
think it's for the sake of trying to make it more balanced, and I have no idea. I have no idea.
It's interesting because obviously that's still in play in the show. Like they still make it obvious that like they showed us the scene where there's the redhead mother, you know, like in a really cool badass moment. Like I love that
They
scene.
tried to tease
it's
it out,
kind of
I
such a bummer
suppose.
that she died because I was like, what is this? I want to follow her story.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
then-
kind of cool. That whole kind of civilization of people, the Aiel,
Yeah.
they get brought in like
interesting.
in a few more.
I don't
series
think
time.
that race gets mentioned.
He does it
Aiel.
once. You know,
Oh,
the
okay.
Gleeman.
Yes.
He mentions that person in a cage. And that Aiel never have their veils down unless
Yes.
you know when they kill, they put their veil on. So this person with the veil down, they weren't killing. And this is meant to kind of expound upon the idea of all these different cultures in this world, which I think is again one of the best things about this series is there is so much depth in terms of the world that's been created.
I do like the way that it depicts how different cultures and different people with different ways of life, how they relate to the wheel of time in a different way. You know, so I was, you know, I have a love-hate thing with the Way of the Leaf people, but for the most part, I do like it. They were the first people who really introduced the concept of the Wheel of Time because you have that scene with that woman leader, and she's like, you know, she has a story about her daughter, and she's doing it for her daughter to improve the world so that when she cycles back in her next life, the world will be a better place.
Wait, what was that?
I think that was in episode 2, Shadows Waiting, where this is where Perrin has that conversation with the Way of the Leaf people. And
she
that's
says
that's
that,
his
yeah.
question about like, you know, what? You can't go without violence. And then she's like, oh, when
Or
was the
what about
last
this?
time you used violence? And how did that turn out, you know?
See, they tried to get a storyline going in that way, but they didn't seem to expand upon it well enough or develop it well enough. From my experience.
Not really. Or they tie that with Perrin and then go, that's his personality. And then they, you know, they just kind of use it as a crutch because even at this very last thing, he's like, it's once again, it feels like cheap storytelling, but I understand the shortcut. Like, if you want to take a shortcut, this is the way to do it, where he just outwardly says,
how can we just sit here while everyone else is willing to fight?
I'm standing. You must.
This is bullshit! All of it! The Way of the Leaf! What are we supposed to do? Just watch our friends die?
Of course not. There are always options other than violence.
What? What can we do?
In my own experience, if you want to help, but don't know how, all you need to do is ask.
he's like, the Way of the Leaf, screw this, to like the bear guy. Okay, what's his name? Loyal.
Yeah, the Ogier.
Yeah, he looks like a lion. So I've been calling him the
It's
Lion
hair.
Man.
It's the hair.
Yeah, and
Maybe the nose.
Well, he goes like, essentially, screw this shit about the Way of the Leaf to this Lion Man who has no connection to that. Like,
Oh, he'd understand it because Ogier, they don't really explain it, but Ogier are like have much longer lifespans than humans. So he's considered like a young Ogier, and he's like 80.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, but still, the show did not establish
No,
like
not at all.
there isn't a
I
scene.
think this is the actual main problem with the show is that they have so much content they're trying to deliver and so little time to do it. So it's like every single scene has to be that same one with the torture scene. Everything has to be so layered and well constructed in an adept way that it can explain so much is going on in such a little frame. But I feel like they haven't done that.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, it's you could have easily done like, he looks at the axe, flashback to his wife getting killed, and he doesn't do it.
Yeah, they could have done that. Why didn't they? It would have taken
Yeah.
like less than a second to flash that scene.
Why did he have to outwardly say like screw the way of the leaf? It's like that's not. It's like you've made it all about that because you think like that's the quickest way for us to understand him, but just put in some work to really like tie us to him. You know, that is not strong enough to create our connection with him. Like just someone once told him that the way of the leaf. You know, if you want to do that, have someone die. Has someone from the way of the leaf die. From like, you know, that woman who was talking to him, have her die right in front of him and go, this was still the right call. We shouldn't have
like
chosen
that happened
violence.
when the White Cloaks attacked them, but I can't remember because it was so long ago when I read the
Well,
books. It's more or less that he gives that up because he does. There's like the whole thing is that he's taken the axe with him after that first encounter. He carries it the whole way with him because he has to defend himself.
Yeah.
But they don't expand that at all.
He just comes across as dumb right now.
Yeah,
like,
and that's the thing.
kinda
That's the thing.
like-
That's one of his concerns, and you get in his inner monologue is the fact that he thinks people think he's stupid. When really, he just likes to take things slowly and to consider things and take his time with things.
You know, I think they didn't give him a chance to shine.
Yeah.
If
It's
that's the
honestly,
case.
it's strange because he is one of the most interesting characters in the first book. Like it goes out with these characters that all their abilities slowly become apparent. So Rand with the channeling and stuff, he's more or less always interesting. But Perrin from the start, the minute he encounters the wolves, he is like someone that is very interesting in terms of his perspective and in terms of what abilities he has. But they haven't developed that.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when we think of like which character's arc this season, like which character has an arc, the only character that arcs is Rand because he starts off being pissed at Egwene for choosing the wisdom life and not going together,
and then he accepts it.
He comes to understand that this is why I love her, and she's her own person, and even though I want this life with her, I have to understand that that's not what she wants. And great, that's I think that's beautiful. And then if you look at everyone else, no one else arcs. So when we come to, for example, Nynaeve, right? She's very like you can say that. Okay, so she is very hesitant about the Aes Sedai, doesn't trust them, and in the end, nothing really happens. Like she
kind
sacrificed.
of has that say where it's like, I would like to go. A wisdom can't marry, but an Aes Sedai can. She kind of said that at the end.
That's
so there is a little bit of
true.
an arc of saying that it is revolving around Lan and her love for him. But
Well,
again,
all right.
maybe we can now talk about Lan.
Wait, before we jump to Lan, I want to just quickly cover off Matt.
Yeah.
Okay, and I keep saying it. So with Matt, this is another thing with the character arc.
Yeah.
I felt like this is another example of they have the Gleeman, and that was the moment where I was like, this doesn't make sense in this scene, but maybe they just have like they're blinded by the books that they don't understand that this scene doesn't make sense.
How it comes across,
because it's the moment where they came across this people at the barn. And the family at the barn, and the Gleeman, they come up to them, and the Gleeman spots like Matt holding a dagger as the barn people approach them, and that is textually is supposed to be a sign that the madness has overtaken him.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make sense. Like people react to threat. Like the guy has an arrow at them. At his friend. I mean, is it really out of the question to be holding a dagger? Like, how is that a sign of madness?
Yeah.
And then one scene later, from that interaction, the Gleeman is telling Rand like, "Hey, I think your brother, your friend over there is going nuts."
Yeah.
I'm like, when did we see that? Like, when has that happened?
Again, I think this is a matter of trying to cram too much into too little.
Yeah,
because their journey together, they're on the road together for a little bit of time before that happens, and then Matt's decline is a bit more gradual.
I think we should have given a scene where we trust or understand where the Gleeman is coming from, and I think this is another example of like just go with it. he's supposed to go this way, so just go with it.
Yeah. We have this plan. You just trust us.
Yeah, just trust us.
As opposed to we're going to make good entertainment and we're going to show you why it's interesting. We're going to invest you in it and then try to play with you. Instead, it's almost like this pretense.
Yeah, and then right. And I love that scene where he makes this bond with this girl, and once again, I think the actor is really good.
Yeah.
That you know, I'm like really buying this, and I think they write it perfectly because she reminds him of his sister, and then they die tragically, and it's almost like I want to follow this. Like, what has Rand gone through? You know, Rand is almost like a privileged boy. You know, like who had never really had to struggle for anything, has this love problem. It's like other people have real issues, you know? So, and you're looking at Matt, and by contrast, you're like, wow, this guy has gone through some shit, right?
Yeah, you mentioned that thing about Rand not really having anything. He kind of starts as a suspect that Tam isn't his dad from like one of the first encounters. I don't know why they made it so he didn't even think about it till it was told, because that's not true. Yeah,
that's also another thing that came out
That's
of nowhere.
One thing that adds to his doubt about who he is.
I think that, I think that would have been a good opportunity to give us like something that's his inner conflict, that it's not like he's just being a brat this whole time about Egwene. You know, like, I don't know, but
it's the poor writing thing.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, with Matt, right, it's fine. I don't hate it. It's just like, it just brings to mind that these were the issues, because, and then they find, okay, great, it's just a knife. And I like that because it's kind of like, this is what you get for not listening to Moraine. Yeah, and I love Moraine. Like, Moraine is the best part of this show. Like, they've really like built her up really well in terms of like, she's guarded for a good reason, because, you know, it's just hard to know who to trust. And you know, look at like the chaos that's like unfolding around her, you know. So I kind of like that. And her being guarded is also a weakness because it's harder for people to trust her.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I like that dilemma, because it's like she can't say much because it's to protect those people, or like she's ready to die for the world. Like, she's like, I'll die. But that makes it like other people they're putting on like different agendas on her that she doesn't have, which is very interesting.
It's a distrust.
From. But so with Matt, you know, they say that it's about the sword, and then before they jump into the portal, Matt's like, "Yeah, I'm not going." And then there's this very clunky scene of them like just yelling at him, and then
clunky is a good way to describe it.
Yeah, it's just very like, anyway. But then she's like, "I felt the darkness in him," but it's like, Moraine, you said it was the sword. What do you mean? You felt like it's kind of like sour grapes, you know? It's kind of like, oh, we don't have him. Well, you know what? He was useless anyway.
I don't know why they did that. It didn't seem congruent with the story.
Yeah. So does that? So I guess from your perspective,
I honestly can't remember what happens in that scenario, but I'm pretty sure they don't break up, because he ends up being in Fal Dalar with the rest of them.
Oh, so he's supposed to be in that.
Because you know how you saw that Pattern Fane at the end had that dagger.
Yes,
that's Matt's dagger. He takes it from him. And it turns out that in the book, Moiraine hasn't healed him from the darkness.
Okay.
But the only way to heal him is to have the dagger at the same time. You know how she did that spell? Where So the guy steals the dagger from Matt without Matt being healed, so he needs it back to be able to live.
Oh.
And that's why he starts to... That's the whole next book, next series, next season, you could say.
But how does that... He's healed, though. He's healed.
He's healed in this, yeah. I don't know why.
So
maybe they're rushing the story along, because Matt, as a character in the books, doesn't become interesting until like book 3, book 5.
Interesting.
Because he's just sick for like a book and a half.
Whoa, okay.
But when he does become interesting, he is like one of the coolest characters.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess. Okay, let's talk about Lan. So you obviously have a big issue.
My
with
complaint
Lan.
is that he seems too good to be true.
And
he's meant to be this poet, king, warrior guy, which is understandable. But he's also like really in touch with his feelings and really eloquent and really grounded and balanced. Obviously, I think he's like meant to be really old as well. Like when I read him and when I engaged with him, he always seemed to me like a very Aragorn type character.
He does have that vibe in this one.
But I feel like the actor doesn't do it justice. The actor comes off almost like smug in certain ways that Viggo Mortensen never did. He always came across as humble, whereas this actor is like very self-satisfied in his delivery. I think like when he's a warrior, he's cool. When he's like very firm and like I don't know how to explain it. He seems to just know everything and be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And you don't want that from a character. You want to have weakness. Like Moiraine is so powerful and knowledgeable, but no one trusts her because she's so guarded.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why you fell in love with her in that way, right?
That's true.
I can't explain. He just doesn't have the flaw. He's just too perfect. And that makes him... this just seems like a character, a poorly written character, as opposed to like actually relating to him.
Yeah. I did... Yeah, that's interesting. I don't have a huge problem with him compared to you, but I can see where you're coming from.
He's meant to be like this guy that is ground out, trying to defend the borderlands. He's lived in a harsh warrior society. So how is it that he's so
clean and composed?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's true. That's true. I guess it's that is different.
I don't know what went on there, but it just seems like he's too charming for a man that's meant to be gruff and suffered a loss of his entire kingdom. He was meant to be the king of Malkia, the Seven Towers at the end. He's lost his family, he's lost his lineage, he's lost his land, but he's still lighthearted and fun and this romantic. It's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
It's too good.
And there's a very weird moment that I think plays off wrong for me, and then which is the moment when Nynaeve, like they're like at the crux of their romantic will they won't they, and Nynaeve is like, I understand why you are like have this bond to Moiraine because you have nothing left and whatever. I'm like, if I'm Lan, I won't like be in love with this interpretation. I'll be like offended. Because I feel like it cheapens the bond that he has with Moiraine. Where it's
no, he understands what she's trying to say because he's perfect.
Well, I don't know what she's trying to say, but maybe. But it's kind of like, is that it? Like you just have this bond with this person because you needed structure and someone to belong to, and you just grabbed onto Moiraine. Is that what we're supposed to believe?
Well, this is kind of the situation he was in. This is kind of expanded upon in the prequel book that was written, I can't remember when chronologically, but it was like after around maybe the third or the seventh book or something like that.
Okay.
But it's that he was like killing himself trying to get revenge for the Darkspawn that killed or that took his home. And then Moiraine comes in contact with him and she's like, I'll give you a purpose. We'll have to find the Dragon Reborn and be prepared for the last battle.
Okay.
That's where it comes about. So you can see that. But still, when did he find this ability? Is it from engaging with Moiraine that he's slowly become this refined character or what's going on?
I do wish that in terms of, obviously, it sounds like it's deviating from the books. So I wish that the prequels, it sounds like it's in the lead up to when they have this prophecy about who the Dragon Reborn is. Obviously, they have this, and maybe we'll touch on that. What the White Tower looks like. This is kind of
the thing about the whole structure of the books until about the fourth book is that Moiraine is trying to push Rand along this path so that he fulfills the prophecies that the dragon is meant to fulfill.
So he has fulfilled it, right?
There are a lot more involved.
Okay.
Like there's almost like this kind of lyric poetry kind of way of what the dragon does. So like causes a certain thing to happen.
Okay.
It's revealed in this very kind of mythic language that they have to interpret as opposed to knowing exactly what he has to do. So this thing about this place called the Stone of Tyr. And Tyr is one of the southern cities that exist in the rest of the land. And this place is like a fortress that's never been breached. And one of the prophecies is that the Stone of Tyr will fall. And so she is trying to make Rand go there so he can fulfill the prophecy. And he's like, I'm not doing what you're telling me to do. You're not pushing me. I don't know what your plans are.
So, interesting, because obviously at the end of this episode, the finale, Rand goes on his own deeper into the
which is untrue because... I feel like
untrue as in it's incongruous to the books.
Incongruous to the book in the sense that he is resistant towards any label, resistant towards being pushed in any direction for about for the first few books because he's like he won't really properly accept his destiny. Where it seems like he is just like
he knows
he's
that
turned.
yeah,
He's accepted his destiny.
a voice
instantly.
told him that he's Dragon Reborn. So
it doesn't ring true. I don't
Oh,
think. That's
okay.
why it doesn't even seem like a series to me. It's annoying.
It's interesting. I wonder where this is going next. But what did you think of the White Tower? So obviously a big part of this story is the White Tower and the Ajas of the Aes Sedai, which is the different factions. There's
Well,
like
that gets developed a lot more when it comes
later.
to later on because without being too explicit with my spoilers, some of the people go to the White Tower and actually learn there. So they join the institution.
All right, interesting.
Which is kind of a giveaway, but but yeah, that gets developed more fully. Plus, you meet a bunch of different sisters along the road.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the way they did it, like I said earlier, the sense that the way of them spending a third of an episode expanding upon this one warder's grief and then killing himself, and then this kind of constructed grief ceremony at the funeral, it just seemed like it's a wasted opportunity. You could have done so much more there with that time, especially considering you're already so time poor. It's like, what was the point of that other than making Lan this ultimate hero character? And he's not even the main protagonist. What's the point?
It actually brings up a lot more questions about the warder bond than it answers because, well, it's magical, you said. It's
I'm assuming,
magical.
yeah. It's a consequence of the weave, or maybe it's like one of the powers from like a Sarangriel or something like that.
Right, because Moraine can close and open the bond whenever she wants. It's obviously not really romantic because Moraine has this relationship with the Amarylline seat.
Yeah, it's more like an intense bond that allows you to experience the other person's consciousness.
But it's not really I don't know, there's something about it that rubs me the wrong way, is that the fact that she can close it and open it when she wants. So because it's like, it's not really a bond then, it's more like, I don't know.
It doesn't seem wrong for me. I mean,
okay.
In the books, I think that she can like mask it. That doesn't mean she can close it off completely. It just means she can like kind of like obscure it a bit.
It's more dull.
Yeah.
Okay. And obviously she's now cut off or cut off from the source.
Yeah. Well, again, this whole scene at the end is played out very differently in the books.
So she was never cut off from the source?
I can't remember exactly, but
I'm
pretty sure no, because like everyone was there at the end. And there was a whole bunch of different things. Like there was this fucking tree construct thing, like an ent more or less, that lived there and protected the eye of the world that you didn't see at all.
How about this horn thing that everyone's
The Horn
trying
of
to get?
Valyr is mainly the plot point for the next book. Which is like they had to
see.
hunt down the horn because you see Pat and Fane leaving with it.
Yeah.
And it's up to the horn blower to be the person that the horn bearer is the person that uses it in the last battle to summon all these
ghosts,
long dead heroes from out of the netherworld into there. Yeah, it's cool. It's really cool the way they do it, especially when they start to bring in some of the heroes that are actually waiting for the horn. It's really cool.
Okay.
It's
Do you
cool.
think we'll see more like flashbacks in the next season to like
if there is a next season?
I think it's been announced.
It has been announced.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the best thing for this series, the best thing about this world for me is the history and the lore and how it's not just taking place in this time, but it's taking place in this whole universe where they have this rich mythology that is just interwoven throughout it. And that's the thing you got from the conversations with like Moiraine explaining the blood of Manetheren, or Lan explaining the long cursed city of Shadar Logoth. It is this sense of something greater beyond what they're in. So it's actually this history. And I think that's what I was talking to you before about the very start of the book. They had this prologue where they show Luzthurin, the dragon, before he was reborn, going mad from the taint.
Oh, yep.
And that puts you in the universe straight away because, like, holy shit, you've just read this scene where this world is towering, this guy is mad, and they're talking about dark ones and prisons and shit. And then all of a sudden you're in the Two Rivers.
That's so interesting because I think they should have started with that.
Yeah, it sets up for the scope of the story perfectly.
Because it's kind of confusing how they start because they just start with like a clip and then it's like Moraine.
Yeah.
You get the sense that Moraine knows like the age ranges of these dragons and you're just like, okay, why?
That first scene of that hunting that man down was just the worst start to a series I've ever experienced before.
Okay,
It seemed so empty compared to what could have been there.
Because it wasn't. ultimately we know now, given that he's like a false dragon, like it doesn't really tie into anything.
Yeah, exactly. I think the only reason they chose not to do it is because like there was this pilot for The Wheel of Time, I think maybe like 10 years ago or so.
That did that.
And their pilot was literally that prologue where Luz Theron, the dragon, is talking to this guy and he's running around at an empty, burnt castle being like, oh, where's my wife? I'm not sure where she is, even though he's just killed her from losing his mind, more or less.
Okay.
And that's like, you can look it up on YouTube. It's still pretty interesting. Watch it after this. But yeah, I think they didn't want to redo that.
Okay.
And I think that was probably a mistake. Because that is the perfect introduction to the whole world of The Wheel of Time.
I think there wasn't an anchor scene like that to set up the stakes.
Because if you knew what was going on, if you got absorbed in that scene, they did it well, you would have been hooked straight away. There would have been no better way to start that.
I think I agree with you. Even obviously, I haven't read it, but I think that's something was missing in that first episode. That
it just seemed empty. That first scene, it was lacking completely.
Especially with what we know now.
It's like these Red Sisters were hunting this random guy who can channel, and then Moiraine was just randomly there as well.
Yeah,
like didn't
on
make
top
any sense.
of the mountain, and they're like,
and she's
all
like,
right,
I know what a
made
Tava Ren
mistake.
is, and then it's too much.
Yeah. Overall,
6 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
This series is 6 out of 10.
That's solid.
It's solid because it's like I said, it's still pretty entertaining. A lot of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
But it's not a top tier show. It's not the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit. That's a 6 out of 10, bearing in mind that it's not what I want from an adaptation of the books that I love.
Right, of course.
So that's me trying to judge it objectively as a series, which is hard for me to distance
how about
myself
okay?
from.
Let's say yes
As an adaptation?
Yeah, as an
like
adaptation.
a 2 or a 3. Because there's just so much that was lacking, and so much of the oomph that comes from the characters just isn't there.
Interesting. I think we. I think I'm a 7 out of 10.
Okay.
And obviously, I brought up a lot of my gripes about the show, but it's only because the promise is there. You know, the seed of like, I think the performances for the most part is there. Although I still have something. Rand's actor, I don't know about him.
You called him Pretty Boy, didn't you?
Pretty Boy, like he just seems like central casting, like from a CW show, if that makes sense. Like he looks like he accidentally stumbled from the set of Riverdale and then he's in this show.
Okay.
But it's fine.
Honestly, I don't have many gripes with the acting. I think my gripes are with the writing.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah,
I think honestly, an actor can only do so much with what they give
true.
him.
That's true. That's true. I think
if anything, Perrin wouldn't have been my choice in casting. Like physically, he's the figure that Perrin needs to be, but I feel like in terms of like how he speaks, that doesn't ring true for me.
I didn't notice it that much because he doesn't get that much screen time. So the show, it really isn't centered on him. Even in that final episode, he did
he
nothing.
didn't do much. I mean, in the books, he's more stoic and he thinks a lot, but he doesn't say too much. In the books, I feel like when he does speak, it's melodramatic and it's over the top and it's forced.
And I feel that too.
Yeah, and it still sticks with me that I love you. It's cringe. It is actual cringe.
Yeah, I actually laughed when.
When me too. I was like,
died.
oh no, I cringed. I didn't laugh. I cringed.
Well, I laughed. I didn't laugh because it's so funny. I just laughed at how ridiculous the scene was. I think there was a better way. Definitely, but I think because it's kind of
then it kind of makes me question, like, why did they construct a pregnant wife character when his story arc wasn't even that significant anyway in the scope of it?
Yeah. It's almost like they didn't understand, and I'm obviously going to give the benefit of a doubt to a book I never read, but obviously the author had a point with this story, whatever storyline he had. It almost felt like the showrunners didn't really understand why the author chose this storyline, so they need to invent their own reason, if that makes sense.
I mean, I can kind of see, because there is this massive theme throughout of him. I've talked about it before, the non-violence theme of what's the point of an axe when all it can do is take life? So he's almost like a philosopher king, not to be too much in terms of my my reveal about the future, but his arc is like was his arc when it concerns the difference between an axe and a hammer spans the whole series, and it doesn't get resolved until like near Tarmon Gaedon, near the very end. So like book 13, 14 is what we're talking about. So he has this kind of question that he can't solve for the whole series. So maybe they need to lend that more significance by making it that the axe killed his wife and his unborn child.
Yeah. It's very interesting because there's a lot of contradictions. So, you know, violence also helped him save his friend and get them get them escape. Obviously, no one's going to bring that up with him because it goes against the character's thought process right now, or like where the show wants to go. Like, because you could easily have a scene for two people who spent a lot of time together. They really don't get much time to strengthen their bond, which is between Egwene and Perrin. Like, they don't really talk that much, and you could have at least had a scene where Egwene goes, you know, sometimes like violence is used for defense, and we have to, like, if it weren't for you, we would both be dead. And I think that was, you know, something.
They kind of did small bits of that throughout. Like at the end, he kind of has that realization of like, fuck the way of the leaf or whatever like that.
Yeah,
but it seems, again, it seems a little bit empty.
Yeah, like that isn't something that stems from, well, first of all, he doesn't really take an action that coincides
Nothing came
with
of
that.
it. He just watched these things happen.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm still hopeful for the next season. I
am
think
too.
There's room to grow.
As long as they learn from the mistakes and they listen to their critics, I think, with an open mind, I think they'll have. There's a lot of source material to draw on, and this series, in terms of the book series, only gets better with each book, more or less.
I hope that Moraine continues to be a key focus in the next season. Yeah. I'll give a prediction. Let's see. I think Egwene will join the Aes Sedai.
That's a fair prediction.
And what color does she go into? Let's see. I don't know many of the other colors, but maybe she goes with the yellow one. So yeah. Can you explain all the other ones? So
blue are the ones that focus on causes in the world. So like, you know, they take on missions and stuff like that, try to save.
And
the activist, you could say.
And they're the secrets.
Yeah,
people,
that's a bit of a misnomer, I think. I think that's a little bit off. They have their own causes, their own agendas, but I think Secret Keepers is a little bit of a reduction of what their scope is.
Is that not in the books, or is that?
No, it's not in the books. They're always considered, the blue Ajara is considered the ones focused with causes.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So the blue are causes, the red are trying to get rid of men that they channel, protect the world from men that can channel. The greens are the battle Ajara, they're the ones that like fight.
Yeah.
The yellow are the healers. The white are the philosophers. And the grey are the diplomats, the advocates. They're the ones that go to like countries and try to talk between kings and negotiate peace and stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't see grey or white.
But you don't see grey or white at all to begin with until they start to develop the politics of the Tower, which they tried to do in a bit of this, but at the same time, they didn't have enough time to do anything that was meaningful.
That's so interesting because why don't we see them in like the kingdoms that we've seen so far? Like,
because they haven't really been established that well either. Like, one of the things they missed out from the first series, from the first book that they could have adapted into the second series, was Matt and Rand actually go to one of the big main cities called Camelin. In Camelin, there's a Queen Morghese, who has an advisor, and it's always meant to be the tradition that their princess or their queen first goes to study with Tarvalon. And learn enough about that. Even if they can't channel or they don't have the capacity to be a full Aes Sedai, they still at least go through an initiatory experience there, so they have this relationship, Tarvalon with Camelin. And when Rand goes, he actually encounters the princess of Camelin, and he gets close with her and her brother. And she's a major plot point. She's a major character for the rest of the series. But they've completely lacked that and missed that out.
Maybe season 2.
It will be. I think she'll come to the tower and like engage with Egwene or something like that.
I see. Okay. Well,
but then you see the relationship Tarvalon has with the world through this kingdom and through the Queen Morghese, which you don't really get an idea without. You have to take their word for it. Again, like this same thing is like this pretense of, trust us, this is what we say happens, as opposed to seeing it for yourself and being absorbed in it.
I think then Egwene might join the blue. I think she'll join the Blue because she works under. She's seen like she's so like inspired by Moraine.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And
That's
so-
a good guess, but again,
okay.
there's more to it than that. I won't give you
Interesting.
any more spoilers
All right,
because
all
her
right.
story is actually interesting.
Okay.
Very
I
good.
see. The idea of the Aes Sedai reminds me of the role of another. Reminds me of a group of people in a different show that we're both currently watching.
Oh, The Witcher?
The Witcher.
The mages?
Yeah, the
That's kind
mages.
of it, because they are mages in a sense. They just go
Yeah.
by a more... mage is more the archetype, where
Yes.
Aes Sedai are the more kind of concrete version of mages in this world.
Yeah, they are technically the mages, but
Yeah.
it's in the world of The Witcher. They have a similar role in the universe of the story.
Similar institution where they go there to
Yes.
train, similar centralized aspect to that, and they all kind of
Advise
influence-
different
Yeah, they go out and they...
kingdoms.
I think what's not really properly developed in this series is that Tarvalon is essentially the main power within the world. It's like the central governance
They're the
to
King's,
the whole world.
King's Landing, essentially.
Yeah. All these little kingdoms exist, but they exist under the supervising
rule
eye of the Aes Sedai.
So
But
the Aes Sedai are the kings?
more or less, but it's more like a matriarchy as opposed to a patriarchy.
Right.
So they're the queens, you could say.
That's wild, because what are the White Cloaks?
The
Because
White
they
Cloaks
seem
are
to
this
be
separate
against-
faction of religious fanatics. And they're against the witches, but again, they're not that powerful to begin with.
That's so interesting, because for the show, it seems like
Yeah.
in the show, like the Aes Sedai are the minority.
Well, that's kind of a theme throughout the book, is that if you compare 3,000 years ago, that cutscene back, the Aes Sedai were like the central body. They were the authority.
The power is gone.
Yeah.
basically.
They're
losing grip.
slowly decaying in terms of their ability to control.
I see.
So they're not as strong as they once were. They were centralized, but then since this time and as things has changed, they're no longer as strong as they once were. So the White Cloaks come out as more of a thorn. To
Interesting,
deal with.
because they hint at that with Moraine's bedside talk with the
Swan
Emerald.
Sanche, the Amarylline Sea.
Yeah, who is, I agree with Moraine or some other person, I think someone from the Blues. She's losing her touch, like she's losing sight, but maybe, so obviously they frame it as because they're so focused on this Dark One thing that they're losing sight of like their control on the people. So that's interesting. I'm interested to see them kind of progress that if they do. Obviously with that seer, the oracle person, she's like, that person is going to destroy you. So that's interesting. That's interesting. They're meant to be lovers. Apparently not in the books.
I think they were lovers a long time ago, but even lovers is probably a
reduction.
They were referred to as pillow friends, which means I think it's like they were best friends.
Yeah,
they probably lent on each other because
they're
the
partners.
period of initiation into the White Tower is like one of the most challenging things you'll ever experience. It's arduous, and people like when you go through it in the second and third books, when whoever will not be named is going to go through their initiation, it's like brutal. And if you fuck up once, you go to a farm or you hard labor for like months at a time. It is brutal what they put you through. So I think that then you need support, and so these pillow friends are people you'd cry on their shoulder when you were suffering, or you'd form these intense bonds where you're best friends with someone, and then best friends obviously can turn to a bit of romanticism, not romanticism, but at least some sexuality.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's always a scope I got from reading the books. That these guys weren't like intense romantic lovers wrapped away in each other. They were just best friends.
Yeah, that makes
and they
sense.
agreed to do this important task, which was help the Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, I think for the most part, at the very least, if we're comparing the two shows, I think the Wheel of Time is actually more effective of a first season than the first season of The Witcher.
Oh yeah, definitely. The Witcher's first season was almost incomprehensible due to that structure.
It has so many interesting ideas, but didn't tell it in a very like a concrete way.
Yeah, they didn't show the ideas as well as they could have. They talked about them a lot, and the lore was there. But again, I think the Wheel of Time did the same thing. I think, but I think they did it a little bit better. It didn't fall prey to it as much as the Witcher series did.
If you are interested, we can talk about the second season when it's done.
Yeah, once we finish The Witcher, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I might even play that game.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, until next time.
a stranger's life. The gate to the path is left ajar. The glare from the sun conceals her smile. There is something in her hands I can't make out, but who stands behind the camera? I hardly knew you, but sometimes I see you standing to the side, just out of sight.